Who am I to believe in love? Oh, love ain't no stranger. I looked around, what did I see? Broken hearted people staring at me. I'm searching 'cause they still believe. Whoa, love ain't no stranger.
David Coverdale must have loved proving a lot of people wrong in this country who wrote him off. Especially as, even though Whitesnake, you know, he'd headlined Donington, he'd had hit records, and he still was getting knocked in the press all the time. You can imagine how bitter he must have been, and how super determined he was going to be to just fuck you to all the British critics. And can you imagine how much of he would have enjoyed being at the very top of his game with that album?
I think Slide It In definitely worked in terms of picking up a new audience. Touring with John Sykes, they had a bona fide, young, good-looking guitar hero. This was definitely, you know, pointing the way forward to where they were going to go, you know, over the next 2 or 3 years.
I listened to the album, and the album sound, it was like the best Whitesnake album that I'd heard, because it had that new feel. It had a new feel to it, and it was like new stuff. It wasn't that old 12-bar types, boring old riffs that we'd heard a million times. It was a new type of those songs, you know, and it sounded nice, and the singing was good. The production was good.
You know, if you're going to play blues rock, then you need it slightly rough-hewn. You know, a little rough around the edges. You don't need it to be, you know, polished like a gemstone.
When Saints and Sinners was recorded, David Coverdale suddenly got a feeling that it's not right, it's not what I want to do, it's a great record, but this lineup isn't working. They don't seem to have the same ambition that I have, and they seem to be rather lazy. Coverdale was determined to break America. This was now his complete ambition, his complete focus. I want to make it big in America because I've never done it on my own terms. And in reality, not any of the Deep Purple members had ever broken away from Deep Purple and become hugely successful in America. Rainbow had done it up to a point, but never mega. Coverdale was absolutely determined to make his mark in America. I think for one reason above everything else, this was going to be the point where he became the most successful member of Deep Purple. He could become a man in his own right apart from Purple and stand above Purple. So I think this was a crucial part of what he was thinking.
We were getting a bit lazy and a bit predictable. The songs to me were starting to get very predictable. Same chord sequences, same grooves, you know, it was too obviously Whitesnake, if you see what I mean. If you listen to Saints and Sinners and then to Slide It In, musically speaking, it's more sophisticated, and it was time for the band to change, in my opinion. Even if I hadn't gone back to the band, I thought it was necessary, because it was starting to get kind of repetitive and a bit stale. And David felt that, and I felt that. Mickey decided to leave about a year after he'd rejoined. So he left at the beginning of '82, rejoined in the summer of '82, left again the summer of '83, okay? And that is when John Sykes comes into the picture, just to replace Mickey, really. And partly as a guitar hero, much more in tune with what was happening in the rock scene at that time, you know, fantastic looking, you know, much more of a Eddie Van Halen type star guitar player than Mickey or Bernie had been, or Mel, you know, who were good players, but didn't have that kind of incendiary excitement that was the thing in the mid-80s with guitar players.
Somebody told me in the middle of the Lizzie tour in February that Whitesnake was interested in me, but like I was having such a good time with Thin Lizzie that I wasn't even interested in Whitesnake, and I never particularly liked Whitesnake, to be honest with you. Not because of David or anything, because I've always liked his voice. I loved it, not from even the Burn days. His voice is great. But it was just like the guitar side of things. Well, I just thought Whitesnake was a little bit bland, and I just thought that the guitar players weren't really going to the new side of things. They tended to stay in the old vein when styles of playing, which is great, you know, but I like to look to the future.
Getting John Sykes into Whitesnake was the most obvious move to break America, because you've got a young, good-looking, you know, flashy guitarist who's very much in the current vogue, you know, post Eddie Van Halen. Everybody was trying all these kind of pyrotechnics and everything, and although Whitesnake were, you know, reached their first commercial peak in '81, you know, while Eddie Van Halen had already rewritten the rule book for rock guitar, it still took a long time for Whitesnake to sort of take that on board, enter into this MTV generation kind of image-led rock band. So with John Sykes next to David, you've got a pretty good, you know, bass there. I mean, you know, the girls are going to like it.
Neil Murray came back into Whitesnake to replace Colin Hodgkinson, who played bass on the album before. Neil had been in the first lineup of Whitesnake. He'd played on many of the albums before. I think image-wise, he fitted the bill a lot better than Colin Hodgkinson did. Colin was a jazz rock musician, a little pencil moustache, looked like he'd been in the RAF. You know, he wasn't a guy that ever looked comfortable on stage in a hard rock band. They're
not happy with the bass player who replaced me, Colin Hodgkinson. So I think mostly through Mel, really saying, oh, you should get Neil back in the band, you know, that would be something that David probably didn't want to do. You know, it would be seen as loss of face. I've supposedly fired this guy, though he didn't actually, but and now I'm bringing him back. But so you still had the six-piece band, but it had kind of somehow got a bit more souped up, with myself and John coming in.
I know the heartache I put you through. Believe me, babe, I'm gonna make it up to you. You are the reason I'm down on my knees. I'm begging you to give me a chance. If only you would give me just a little more time. Give me just a little more time. Give me just a little more time. Give me just a little more time to prove it to you.
We were touring like that, but then Mel had this accident which really put him out of action completely. His arm just stopped working, basically. There was a nerve damage to it through a silly accident that he had. Then John Lord left to join the reforming Deep Purple. So then you've really got a four-piece band, and in actual fact, in Britain, people don't really know that version of the band. They might see it on the videos that we did for Slow and Easy and Love Ain't No Stranger, but we toured in America and Japan quite a bit as a four-piece. So myself, John Sykes, Cozy and David, with a sort of keyboard player on the side, not a real proper member of the band. And we did great. That was a very musically successful version of the band, but it didn't record like that.
I want a superstitious woman with a superstitious mind. And I don't mind, baby. Oh, yeah. My heart is beating faster, baby. It's beating like a big bass drum.
I think the idea of having one lead guitarist on stage it made the band appear a lot more streamlined. I mean, later on he'd go back to working with two guitarists again, but I think at the time perhaps this was seen as being a kind of a leaner, hungrier Whitesnake. You also had Sykes look like a guitar hero, he looked like a superstar. And on stage with Mel Galley, who frankly didn't, it would have been an odd combination. You'd have had one axe hero, one big pin-up, and you'd have had one guy, fantastic musician and songwriter, but who wasn't going to look as hot in the videos. So I think the decision just to stick with Sykes was to do as much with image as anything else.
I don't think it affected Whitesnake, to be honest with you. They were a bit more metal, as opposed to heavy rock, if you understand the sort of subtle difference between the two. And they didn't lose anything in melody, to be honest with you, but they were a more aggressive sounding band than they had when they had two guitar players, be it Bernie Marsden and Mickey Moody or Mel Galley and Mickey Moody.
Make love to me slow and easy. Take me down slow and easy. Rock me till I'm back to the bone. Take me down slow and easy. Make love to me slow and easy. I'm gonna need a hard rock trouble. It's coming my way. Rock me till I'm back to the bone. Come on, baby. Come on.
We toured in America supporting Quiet Riot for about 6 or 8 weeks, and that was really the start of Whitesnake taking off in America. So at the end of that period, the whole thing had completely changed. Myself and John had re-recorded all the parts, some of the guitar parts and all the bass parts on Slide It In for the American version of the album, and that changed the sound of it. And then David's, on seeing the video for Slide It In, although this is much better, you've got guitar, singer, bass, drums, and that's it, Suddenly it's a new sort of image and new music and everything. It was much more forward-looking in a sense, certainly in terms of being successful in the States.
The thing with the new album was we only really went to get a remix on it for America, so it was like only 2 days to beef up the chords and things. I hardly did anything on that, I just did a few chord pieces. It wasn't like I was doing the album from the start, because the album was recorded before I joined.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So was the other guitar player playing?
Yeah, Mel's playing most of the parts. I mean, I do chords and a few fills and things, but it was like dead. It was like we got to remix it and everything, and like it was just come in and beef it up because it just turned into like a little bit.
I can understand why UK fans would view having the album remixed as a certain act of betrayal, but it's you know, die-hard fans, yeah, but a lot of people have been like, yeah, bothered. You know, I mean, it wasn't remixed for us. We got the good version. So, you know, to a certain extent, it's like, you know, do I really care? You know, I've got the good version. You know, and if there's a load of, you know, cloth-eared dolts on the other side of the pond that, you know, can't grasp the brilliance of what I'm listening to and have to have it completely redone for them, that's their problem. It's not mine.
I think there is something in Coverdale's statement that he criticised the US version, Slide It In, and said that it lacked bollocks. I think David is being a little bit disingenuous at times because I didn't see him stopping that version going out. You know, Coverdale wanted to break America. In recent years, he's gone back and admitted that, and he's gone back and he's criticised some of the Whitesnake albums, or you know, certainly the albums that he made in the mid-80s. He's gone and criticised that sound, but he certainly wasn't doing that at the time. He was extremely gung-ho about the Whitesnake's new direction. I think at the time he was happy with it if he thought it was going to sell.
Guilty of Love is a single that's very redolent of sort of the Come and Get It, Stroke Ready and Willing era of Whitesnake, which is incredibly popular here in the UK. And it harks back to that kind of style of Whitesnake, so you can understand why it was a very popular song here in the UK. But of course America was not, you know, it hadn't liked what it had heard before, but it was listening out for stuff that sounded like Led Zeppelin, so they're going to go for Slow and Easy, Love Ain't No Stranger, and that kind of more epic sort of sounding Whitesnake, which was to a certain extent something new that Coverdale had tried with Slide It In. I mean, he hadn't gone that far down that route before.
And Guilty of Love is it's a great kind of lost Whitesnake single. It was sort of, that was supposed to be Coverdale's new direction, but it wasn't quite going the whole hog for the American market. You listen to the song now, it's actually a really good track. It sounds rather a lot like Thin Lizzy. It's not a song that's going to win over an audience of sort of 17, 18-year-olds who've just gone out and bought Def Leppard's Pyromania and are looking for more music in that vein. It's just not going to happen.
Guilty of love, guilty of love, guilty. Guilty of love, guilty of love, guilty. In the first degree, guilty of love, guilty of love, guilty. In the first degree, guilty of love, guilty of love, guilty. In the first degree.
Well, the 1987 album was the moment they broke huge, but what they did on Slide It In was actually establish itself in America as an act people had noticed. You don't sell 500,000 records without being noticed by people. So for the first time, Whitesnake proved the point. They could sell records in America and sell them at a decent level as well. Now, it was made with the 1983 Donington lineup, which was Hodgkinson and bass with Cozy Powell and drums. You had Mel Galley, you had Mickey Moody on guitar, you had John Lord on keyboards, and of course Mr. David Coverdale himself on vocals, wishing everybody well. But what it had was songs like Love Ain't No Stranger, which was the perfect American-style power ballad with a video attached that had that MTV-friendly orientation. So it's much more of we're going to break America type record. This was the moment that Whitesnake made their intentions fully known. And whilst it wasn't a mega seller, it did better than any other Whitesnake album had ever done in America. Sold over 500,000 copies and finally put Whitesnake into people's consciousness in America. And it was a cut and thrust 4-piece, let's go for it, we look good, this is the time for Whitesnake, and this is a time for us to take America.
They'd signed a new deal with Geffen Records. They got, you know, a big push behind them. And although that wasn't the album, the big watershed album, it was certainly instrumental in them breaking America. But it was absolutely got one of the worst reviews I've ever seen. And I remember it to this day. Gary Bushell, later of The Sun, reviewing it for Sounds. And just such a personal attack on David Coverdale. I mean, it just tore into Coverdale like you wouldn't believe. And he would later do that to Michael Schenker, who'd been in the Scorpions and UFO. So I think when Bushell liked to get in and give somebody a good kicking, and I think Bushell was pretty pally with Ritchie Blackmore then, so there might have been a sort of, I'm not saying he did it for his old mate, but it certainly he knew that Blackmore would have enjoyed seeing Coverdale getting rubbished. So I'm not saying it was so vindictive. I mean, it was absolutely hilarious, and I could, you know, I've never read the review since, but I can still quote lines from it 2 years later. So it was a good one. It was funny. But no, the album was a lot better than he gave it credit for, but it was hard to imagine how a band's career could survive a mauling like that in what was then the most important, you know, rock magazine for serious hard rock and metal acts in the country. But so they did. But it was, I thought the game could be up for them then after that.
Now I'm alone here, and I can't hide. The sun don't shine me without you by my side. You are the reason I'm down on my knees. I'm begging you to give me a chance. If only you would give me just a little more time. Give me just a little more time. Give me just a little more time. Give me just a little more time to prove it to you.
I do believe Slide It In went a long way to upping Whitesnake's profile, you know, on the world rock stage. But I think that had more to do, I think, with trends in rock at the time. I mean, everything was slowly gearing up to hair metal. You know, the explosion of hair metal, and that sort of that fracture in rock, where, you know, you had the glam poodles and you had the die-hard purist and thrash fans, kind of went like that. I mean, only later did it become socially acceptable within metal circles for the two to actually cross and to be able to like Whitesnake and Def Leppard and also Metallica and Venom and, you know, Celtic Frost and, you know. So that you know, if that was the mood, you know, what metal or heavy rock and metal bands had been striving for throughout the early 80s was really coming to fruition. You know, like actually getting hit singles, actually getting airplay. It was all moving, and therefore, you know, the minute they started to, you know, because it's good music, regardless of what some arse at Radio 1 decides, you know, when they say they're not going to play it, which was the case back in the 80s, you know, suddenly kind of like it got more popular and more people heard these songs on the radio and went, oh, I actually quite like that, I'm going to buy more, and it's building, and it's just that whole rolling thing that obviously by the time, you know, Coverdale had gone through the repackaging grinder that the Americans put him through and came out with 1987, I mean, he was right in the thick of things with you know, with Bon Jovi. it was all sort of moving in that direction. So yeah, I do think that Slide It In went a long way to raising Whitesnake's profile, but I think that's more to do with the way everything else was moving, not something that Whitesnake, I think, specifically did, you know, apart from release a very good record.
By 1984, he broke in Europe. He had Europe and the UK, and I think he wanted to set his sights higher. And at that point in time as well, you'd seen bands like Def Leppard breaking America. You know, Van Halen had come back and made the 1984 album, and I think Coverdale wanted a piece of that for himself. You know, I do think some Whitesnake fans were suspicious of it, of Slide It In, and of where Coverdale was going. It's also worth remembering that it wasn't as good an album as Ready and Willing or Come and Get It, you know, two of the albums that Whitesnake had made before. So I think that had more to do with it than more to do with the UK audience feeling a bit let down.
I don't think Coverdale was aiming for the American market specifically. I think people around him had an eye on it, which accounts for why the album was like reproduced for America. You only have to listen to the music on Slide It In, and it's a natural progression. Every Whitesnake or David Coverdale record post Deep Purple was almost like a natural progression. I mean, there were one or two slight hiccups. Saints and Sinners, for example, is not the greatest album in the world, but it's not a bad record by a long shot. Like I said, it's a natural progression from what had gone before, but perhaps even better. I mean, it's bombastic blues rock with, you know, it's paying its debt to Zeppelin by this point more than the echoes of bluesy, funky, soulful Deep Purple, which is how they obviously started out. It's like a combination of the two.
Whitesnake have always been fairly anachronistic in the terms of the fashionable, trendy music press, because if you think about it, when David was launching Whitesnake, punk had happened, new wave was in its first throes, and there he is making records that sound like Free, who were around in the very early 70s, I mean, and with very little anything new to offer. I mean, you know, David's concession to new wave as he might have worn a skinny tie with a leather bomber jacket once, you know, but they've always been anachronistic. I mean, they were ripping off Led Zeppelin in 1987, but it takes a hard heart not to enjoy that title track, doesn't it? The title track from Slide It In is fantastic. I mean, you know, check your brain in at the door before for maximum enjoyment, because it is incredibly stupid, sexist rock song. But then again, what's wrong with that, really?
The highlights of Slide It In are obviously the title track, just because it's such a dumbass rock song that I don't think you can fail to like it. And I, you know, being the puerile idiot that I am, I always used to smile about the fact that they had a song called Spit It Out the other side. But, you know, I mean, that's part of the reason that you like David Coverdale and Whitesnake, because he used to, certainly, come up with his shit, and it was funny shit at the end of the day, and you can't get around that, you know. I mean, it was, you know, he used to drive certain people mad, and that was part of the reason that you liked it as well. And they're catchy songs.
I think that the Slide It In, the title, I mean, obviously the title of the album is very confrontational, as was the title track itself, Slide It In Right to the Top. I think that was Coverdale's attempt to poke fun at, you know, a lot of his critics in the UK. You know, Whitesnake had been singled out for a lot of criticism for their sort of attitude towards women in the images on the album sleeves and in Coverdale's lyrics, and I think that was him being deliberately confrontational. Out in America, I don't think they necessarily saw the double entendre at all. I think American rock, a lot of American rock was, you know, as unsubtle as Whitesnake. And I'm sure out there it was just celebrated as just, yeah, great. You know, slide it in. Slide it in, right to the top. Slide it in, I ain't never gonna stop. Slide it in, right to the top. Slide it in, slide it in, slide it in, right to the top. Slide it in, I ain't never gonna stop. Slide it in, right to the top. Come on. Slide it in, slide it in, slide it, slide it in, slide it in.
Using Slide It In for the American copy of the album to open the album is one of the very rare examples of America getting it right. It's a very good track, very quick, punchy. You can understand why it was used. I don't think Gambler actually is a very good song. In fact, I personally think it's one of the weakest on Slide It In, and have never been able to sort of understand why it was used as an opener. I mean, it's kind of like, if you look at Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast, look at Gangland and Invaders, and I mean, compared with the rest of the album, they're shit, basically. You know, and with hindsight, you get people now reassessing that album and saying, well, you know, they're crap, or we don't know what they were doing on the record. It's the same with Gambler on Slide It In. Low points of Slide It In are specifically the sleeve, which doesn't match up to some of the puerile, childish highlights of earlier Whitesnake sleeves, which were mostly noted for depicting a woman's vulva in the snake of the tongue in a very crass fashion, but still sleeves that occasionally I'll pull out today. People at home and go, hey, look at that. But the sleeve wasn't up to much compared with what had gone before, have to be honest. Gambler's not a particularly great song to open the album with, but by the time you got past it, you know, there's such good stuff on the record that, you know, it's like, whoa, you know, I'm running with this kind of thing. There aren't too many low points, really, to be honest with you, with Slide It In.
Superstitious woman, I got a superstitious mind, and I don't care. Come on, so take me down.
Slow and Easy and Love Ain't No Stranger are the most obvious Zeppelin type rockers. A lot of the music at this point was sort of half that Deep Purple funky blues sound that Coverdale, along with Glenn Hughes, had kind of made their own in Deep Purple, and half his Led Zeppelin aspirations. You know, they're doing something slightly different, and it working within the new framework that he had set up for Whitesnake. You know, and like I said, I don't believe for a minute that it was as pre-planned as something like 1987 was, but you can certainly see that people around Whitesnake or within the Whitesnake camp would have started hearing this stuff and started to think, oh, hang on a minute, maybe we've got bigger fish to fry here.
Songs like Slow and Easy and Love Ain't No Stranger, they are the sort of the test run, the dummy run, if you like, for what Whitesnake did with the 1987 and the Slip of the Tongue albums, which is create music that was designed to be heard on American radio and which would lend itself well to a big video on MTV.
Want a superstitious woman, she got a superstitious mind.
What those songs did is a kind of sanitized version of Led Zeppelin in a way. It takes a sort of a very traditional bluesy hard rock and it takes off all the hard edges, puts a big guitar solo on there, lots of dynamics, lots of light and shade, lots of opportunity for Coverdale to shake his head around, a bit of pelvic thrusting. That's what those songs represent, and they were absolutely perfect for the Americans in 1984.
Superstitious woman with a superstitious mind, and I don't mind, baby. Look out! My heart is beating faster, babe, speaking like a big bass drum.
I think the videos for Whitesnake by the time of Slide It In were incredibly important. I mean, Whitesnake videos up until that point were pretty much standard live in a studio, as it were, fare. You know, like they'd hire a soundstage, they'd perform like they were playing a gig, and that was it. I mean, that was pretty much it. And it's the first time that they kind of even took that kind of approach and sort of tried to glam it up a bit. You know, it's like I said, a transitionary period. It was almost like they were suddenly starting to understand the medium of the promo video and how it could benefit the band.
Oh, love ain't no stranger. I looked around, what did I see? Broken-hearted people staring at me, all searching cause they still believe. Oh, love ain't no stranger.
David is very hard to shift. He's like a very immovable boulder, but once you get him moving, he suddenly decides, okay, I'm completely going to change my opinion. I mean, the sort of music that he used to put down, you know, very American kind of melodic rock, he then, having been influenced particularly by John Kolodner from Geffen Records, who, you know, was responsible for signing the band and promising that he was going to make Whitesnake a huge band in America. He would be saying to David all the time, you know, listen to this, listen to that, you know, you've got to be more like Led Zeppelin, you've got to be much more attuned to the American market. So when David kind of first resisted, and he would say, oh no, everything's fine the way it is, and I'm very happy, and then a year later, he would still be being told, well, you know, it's a step in the right direction as far as musically Slide It In, but the image of the band is rubbish. You've got all these old looking guys, etc., etc. It's still too much like it was before. So he kind of was changing, and I think it was necessary.
Slide It In, without a doubt, is the end of Whitesnake as I think most people in the UK who grew up liking heavy rock in the late 70s and early 80s, they ceased to be the band that they actually liked. It's not to say there's anything intrinsically wrong with what they went and did afterwards. I mean, for someone like me, it's the end of Whitesnake as a good band. It's also possibly one of their best albums. You know, they did go on and do some interesting stuff, and they can remain an enjoyable band in the live arena today to a certain extent. But you know, the Whitesnake that I got into around the time of Love Hunter and Ready and Willing and with singles like Fall for Your Loving ceased to exist after Slide It In.
I think Slide It In, the album, signifies the end of that first era of Whitesnake, the British blues rock period. This was the point that I think that David Coverdale started to think very seriously about changing the look of the band and you know, selling a new version of Whitesnake specifically to the Americans. Slide It In completely sets up Whitesnake for 1987. Obviously that album took it even further. The hair got bigger, the guitar solos got bigger, the egos got bigger. I mean, the production on 1987 is kind of everything but the kitchen sink. You know, Slide It In is a lot more subtle than that, astonishingly, despite the title. But you can see exactly where Whitesnake are heading.
I don't personally believe that when Slide It In was made as an album, and written and recorded, that David really had any kind of vision for what would happen with 1987. I think that all came about because people started to hear something in what they were doing and thinking, this style, specific style of what they're doing could really work in America, and it could be the key to unlocking a door that has thus far remained shut. So, I mean, in some sense, yes, it is a precursor, and again, you know, a progression. Everything up until Slide It In was, I would deem a natural progression. After that, I wouldn't say it was a natural progression. It was an undeniable progression, but it was moved in that direction because of outside influences.
Well, we'd never played anywhere as big as that, and I've never played anywhere that big again. It was about 350,000 people when we did 2 nights, I think. Certainly one night as one of the bands with Queen and maybe with Iron Maiden, possibly, I can't remember, but had a week off in Rio in between, which was rather nice. But it becomes a sea of humanity, and it's actually much easier to play to hundreds of thousands of people than it is to play to 20 people in a little place, because they're just anonymous. It's just a mass of people, and you're on a huge big stage, which actually isn't very good for sound and hearing each other, but it means that you've got to run around and put a show on and do very big gestures, and it encourages you to be a sort of larger-than-life rock band. It's not the ideal thing for producing great music, but certainly I think we did very well. The only trouble for me and Cozy was that the people who televised it and then put that out as a video concentrated solely on the ones that they thought were good-looking, which was David and John, and me and Cozy got virtually no screen time whatsoever. It's funny when you go to other countries, particularly Japan. It's a very kind of teeny bopper type thing. You know, if you've got a couple of good-looking guys in the band, they'll concentrate on them to the exclusion of everybody else. And there was a bit of that in Brazil as well. You know, oh, these are the beautiful ones, you know, forget the rest.
Where do you put Slide It in Whitesnake's overall career? You'd have to slide it in right to the top, I very it's up. It's right at the top. It's up there. It's right at the top. I think it's one of the best albums I think that Whitesnake made. And you know, given that even up to and including 1987, I don't think they made a bad record. They came later. You know, Trouble is an interesting curio, I think, these days. I mean, to be honest, I think that Northwinds and David Coverdale's Whitesnake is two solo records, which obviously were sort of the testing water and the blueprint, and the Snakebite EP as well. All of that stuff's actually better than Trouble, but Trouble's like an interesting curio. But then Love Hunter, storming album, Ready and Willing and Come and Get It. Those are three brilliant records in a row. Saints and Sinners is not a bad record, but it just falls off. And then they get right back on track, if not above where they were with Slide It In.
I think Slide It In, it's like Saints and Sinners, the album that came before. It's a sort of transitional record. I don't think Slide It In is anyone's favourite Whitesnake album. But it is the album that kind of bridged the gap between the old school moustaches, brandy drinking gentleman's club that was Whitesnake in 1982 and 83, and obviously the Whitesnake that came out in 1987, where David Coverdale had John Bon Jovi's hair and everybody's trussed up in spandex and sucking their cheeks in for the cameras. This is the album that sort of bridges the gap between the two.
If you mention the name Whitesnake to people, they're talking about a big, serious, arena-filling, platinum-selling mega rock act. And they played a Monsters of Rock tour not too long ago, in probably 2002, 2003. And you know, UK arenas, and they can still do it with a lineup that had, God, I mean, you know, it's just really difficult to remember who was in that band. There was a guy called Red Beach, I believe, who was in Winger. There was a guy called Doug Aldridge, who's been in Dio and various other bands. There was, Christ, I mean, who else was in the band? I can't tell you whether Adrian Vanderbilt was in it. It was only a couple of years ago. Now, what that really tells you is, A, I've got a bad memory, and B, David Coverdale is all that matters. He is all that matters, you know, and it was a good performance. And, you know, I was down the front rocking. But Whitesnake will be always remembered as a big, big classic rock act.
Love ain't no stranger. I looked around and what did I see? Broken heart, people staring at me.
To me, Whitesnake and David Coverdale are synonymous, no question. Coverdale is the band is Coverdale in the same way that Lemmy is Motorhead and Motorhead is Lemmy. Coverdale was the vision, the driving force, the voice, the image, everything about Whitesnake. At some point, Whitesnake had made an album that appeals to you. And that's the important thing. They tried different things, they changed, some worked, some different. Ultimately, I think David Coverdale can look back at Whitesnake and say, you know what, I've achieved a lot with this. I've made myself into a household name, and I've done it pretty much on my terms.